The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you interviews with the candidates in the special election for state representative. 1623 Studios is hosting us, and Steve Hagan, reporter with the Gloucester Daily Times, will be covering the interviews. The League is a nonpartisan organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in their government. We do not endorse any individual candidate for public office. The special election for state representative is Tuesday, March 31st, and the primary is March 3rd. I'm June Michaels, a Rockport resident. The candidate with me is Andrew Drew Tarr, a lifetime Gloucester resident. Drew was hired as an aide to Representative Anne Margaret Ferranti in 2016 and served in several roles, including as a research and district director. A product of Massachusetts public education, Drew attended Gloucester Public Schools, North Shore Community College, and is currently in the process of completing his bachelor's in political science at UMass Dartmouth. Prior to working with Representative Ferranti, Drew worked in retail management in Gloucester and served as a board member for the Young Democrats of Massachusetts. Drew is an active member of Spiron Lodge in Rockport and the Gloucester Democratic City Committee. He and his wife Jen have 2 sons, and today is his birthday. Is there anything you would like to add to the, of a personal nature to the introduction?
No, that was pretty much covers it. Although, since we're sitting here with the League of Women Voters, I'll say I was raised by mostly women. I was raised by my mother, who worked 2 jobs to support our family, my 2 sisters, who were a decade older than me, and my grandmother. So very, very happy to be here with League of Women Voters.
Thank you. What was the most important reason for deciding to run for state representative?
So I'm running for state rep to continue the legacy of service that Anne Margaret had for this district. You know, she was the rep since 2009, and she did a lot of good for this district, and she knew how to do that good in the district and on Beacon Hill. And I'm working to continue that legacy, not to be Anne Margaret again, but to continue that sort of service, same kind of priorities, and use my experience on Beacon Hill to represent the district well.
You're running as a Democrat. Please explain how your policies and goals are represented by that party.
So I think Democrats really are, or should be, the party of the working class. I think over the last 40 or 50 years, some of the parties forgotten that. But I think that we should have a laser focus on the working class, on those in need, on our seniors, and that means of housing affordability. That's a big topic here on Cape Ann and around the Commonwealth right now. That means education, because one of the ways you can get higher in the working class and maybe even beyond is with a great education. We have the #1 education here in Massachusetts, but it can always be better. One of our mottos in our office was always moving forward, because if you're not moving forward, you tend to fall behind. We don't want to rest on our laurels. And third is economic development, which sort of goes in with education. We want to make sure that we're creating jobs here on Cape Ann, that people can work and afford to live, stay here on Cape Ann, or elsewhere if they'd like to.
What do you believe are the most important issues for the voters?
I think I sort of just covered that right there, but the #1 I've heard in person and in the Facebook-averse is housing affordability. I saw someone on one of the local groups trying to find all utilities included housing for under $1,300 a month, and that is just not feasible on Cape Ann. I don't know if it's feasible anywhere in the Commonwealth right now. So I'd put housing affordability as probably the #1 issue that I've been hearing about, and that's a complex topic. It involves rebuilding housing stock. We've been almost 300,000 units behind the previous 30 years that we were building housing. We've got more people. If we've got people, we need housing to put them in. I think it also involves making sure a lot of that's affordable housing, housing that has controls on it that make sure we can have people who work in our community live in our community.
If you could get only one bill through the legislative session this time, what would that bill be?
I think if we're going pie in the sky, I could do any bill. I would love to see us truly achieve the promise of universal health care here in Massachusetts. We have some of the greatest health care rates in the country. We have the greatest health care system in the country, but there are still a lot of people in Massachusetts who cannot afford health care, or even when they could technically purchase into health care, they can't even afford that. Unfortunately, the federal government is now pulling back even more as a partner on health care, as in many things. That would be my greatest wish, is if we could get some actual universal health care in Massachusetts.
What committees would you ask to be placed on, and what would your priority for that committee or committees be?
I think my number one, maybe also would be a little pie in the sky as a freshman rep, would be Ways and Means. I worked a lot with Rep. Ferranti on Ways and Means when she was vice chair. Traveled the state, listening to different parts of the state, what their budget priorities are. The budget is a very big piece of legislation. It happens every year, and it's very, very impactful for the districts where these monies go, because policy is great, but if you don't have money to back up the policy, then the policy isn't worth much. So when we did our budgets, we always looked at what are the amendments that we could file that would work on the ground for the people of Cape Ann. I think in that similar vein, economic development would be another interesting committee. Again, one that I worked on when I worked for Rep. Ferranti.
What budget priorities should the legislature set for dealing with the cuts and the uncertainty of federal funding?
Well, I think uncertainty is a very significant part of that, is that even with the BBB bill, we still don't know from a day-to-day basis what the federal government is going to do. Healthcare is obviously a significant priority. It's a significant part of the budget. We need to make sure that people are prioritized, make sure that they don't lose their healthcare. You don't have healthcare, it's very hard to live. I think that would be one of the most significant areas, as well as our social safety net. We saw sort of the chaos that happens when you don't have food to eat, which happened when SNAP benefits were unlawfully, temporarily suspended by the federal government. We need to make sure that we're looking out for the people who are doing the work, and this is the case, is that a lot of people on Mass Health, a lot of people on SNAP, they're not layabouts just hanging about collecting their food stamps. They're doing the work in our communities, and we need to make sure that they're protected.
Do you think the Massachusetts legislature should be audited?
I am supportive of an audit of the legislature, a third-party independent audit of the legislature, yes. I'd like it to be non-political as much as possible, but yes.
Do you agree with the MBTA Communities Law passed in 2021, which mandates more dense zoning close to public transportation? And if not, what alternative would you suggest?
Well, I am supportive of the law. I think it's part of a bigger picture. Again, building housing is only a part of that picture in terms of housing affordability. It is a significant one, since we are market-based economy. We need to make sure we have enough supply for the demand that we have. So I am in favor of making sure that we have appropriate amounts of housing in the places where it makes sense to have them. There's no point in having cluster developments in West Gloucester, where someone would have to get on get in their car, drive down a road that may be a private road, may not be fully paved, in order to get to a train station. They need to be where the transit is, where the economic activity is, in order for that housing to make sense.
What should the legislature do if thousands of ICE agents are sent to Boston and the North Shore to arrest immigrants?
That's a tough one, because from a legal perspective, we're preempted on a lot of issues. The federal government just has jurisdiction over immigration, and it's very hard to interfere in that or intervene in that. I am supportive of the effort to have federal agents identify themselves and not be masked. I think that's very, very significant. Anyone could go online, buy some body armor, buy a fake badge, and say, "Oh, I'm with ICE, get in the van." We can't have that sort of lawlessness happen. Law enforcement needs to be law enforcement, not lawless.
Education. what specific state education initiatives would you support to improve the district's K through 12?
So one of the things that I would support is, in the grand scheme of things, we want to look at the Chapter 70 formula again. We want to make sure that it's working for our districts. That's a big chunk of activity that needs to happen. On the lower level, I think the priority is making sure that we're getting monies into the district where it doesn't get diluted by that formula. Things like the circuit breaker for special education, that's directly reimbursing our cities and towns, the school districts, for the special education costs. It's innovative programs such as the Science Center at O'Malley and the vocational school at Gloucester High School. Investing in these programs, again, big fan of using the budget to implement the sort of priorities that we see. As education is one, I'd be using the budget and what I could get in the budget to do those sort of things for our education locally.
Do you think the millionaire tax revenue is being used appropriately?
I think there are some great things that are coming from the millionaire's tax revenue. I think universal free community college is a fantastic pathway for Massachusetts residents. I think universal school meals is one more thing that we don't have to worry about in the whole universe of education, because education, what happens at schools is a lot more than just instruction. If you're hungry, you can't eat. If your parents are worrying about lunch debt, it's harder for them to get on at home. I think when you look at education and you look at the districts that do well and the districts that underperform, there isn't as much variation as you would think in things like class size or in things like education costs per student. What you see is that wealthier communities have better wraparound services for students. So these are numbers that are not reflected in school budgets. We need to make sure that we're sort of building in these wraparound services so that we have students who are ready and able and willing to learn.
All 4 Cape Ann communities are coastal communities. What would you do to prepare the district for the impact of climate change and rising sea levels on seawalls, waterfront property, and other infrastructure? And do you support developing a staged retreat from the waterfront?
Wow, big one. Climate change is a big issue, and I don't know that a staged retreat is very politically viable. I don't think it's economically viable, considering how much we depend on our waterfront. We've got our fishing industry on our waterfront. I think we need to very, very much lean on state grants, make sure that we're accessing the things that we can, like the seawall along Gloucester High School, these sort of things. I would say federal grants, but federal grants are sort of drying up these days. Just recently, a brick grant from FEMA was withdrawn from Rockport to look at raising Thatcher Road. The state did come in with a grant to fulfill that. Those are the sort of things we need to look at these projects sort of piece by piece because that's how the money is going to come in.
Is there a specific state initiative you'd propose to bolster the fishing industry and the blue economy?
I think we need to look at the blue economy and see how we as a region can bolster ourselves. You know, we're facing challenges in climate change as a matter of whether or not the fish are there to fish. We're facing challenges with the offshore windmills interfering with fishing grounds. It's going to take a holistic look at the blue economy as a region in order to address these things.
Is there any other industry that would work well in our district?
I think that we have a good burgeoning amount of interest in biotech. It's an amount of jobs that doesn't have to be high-paid scientists. You know, we're training students at the Gloucester Biotechnology Academy who were maybe previously people who would have gone into the fishing industry, but now they're transitioning into lab jobs, and some are deciding to go on to college, some are deciding to just stick with the lab jobs. It's good paying work. It doesn't take a significant amount of further education. You know, it's an intensive course. I think we need to be looking at trades, making sure that those are accurately represented. We have a great regional high school. My son is a senior at Essex Tech. That's very, very oversubscribed, and we don't see those numbers transition back to Gloucester High School's vocational school. And we need to get to the root of why that is, whether we need revamp in equipment, revamp in marketing for the vocational school, but it's really about creating good paying jobs for people so that they can live and stay here.
Could you talk about a specific experience you had working at the state level and working as a legislative assistant to the previous representative? Something that stood out in your mind and made you want to run or want to run and hide?
Well, let me talk a little bit about what it was like working for Ann Margaret, because that sort of informs how I am looking at what I am going to have to be doing in this job. Ann Margaret was very intelligent. She always had something going on in her mind when she was looking at budgets or economic development or meeting with constituents. There was always a chessboard. She would say, literally, I can see the chessboard pieces moving. There would be things that came up in meetings, and then months later she would bring it back up to this person. You said you needed this for that. Now we're going to go look at this bill over here and see if we can get you some money for that. It's really a holistic approach in making sure we've got all this information out here in the community. Everyone needs money for X, or everyone has a priority for Y, and taking that in, digesting it, and then acting on it where we can. That's sort of going to be my priority, where I'm very much hoping that the budget is a good one. It might not be. Its revenues are projected around 2.9%, I think, to increase. The governor just released her budget today, which increases about 3.8%. So a little optimism on the part of the governor. We'll see what the House and Senate do. I'd like to get into the budget and make sure that all these needs that are on Cape Ann, we can sort of put in our basket and pull out, see what we can make the most of those budget monies.
Well, you have given very concise answers, and I have run out of questions, so it's time for you to address the voters out there for a minute.
Thank you. My name's Drew Tarr, and I'm asking for your vote in the primary on March 3rd and the general election on March 31st. In politics, it's not just voting on bills, there's a lot of relationships, and I've had the very much significant benefit of spending the last 9 years building relationships here in the community and on Beacon Hill. I'd like to take that unique asset that I have and use that in order to better our community. In our office, as I said a couple minutes ago, we said always moving forward. It was sort of a pun on Ann Margaret's initials, but it became this mantra that we put forth, because if we're not moving forward, we're going to fall behind. I want to make sure that Cape Ann is always moving forward. So I hope that I have your vote and your confidence to be your next state representative.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Drew Tarr, Democrat primary candidate, for agreeing to be interviewed, and thank 1623 Studios and the Gloucester Daily Times for making this accessible to the public. Please remember to vote in the primary on March 3rd and in the general special election on March 31st. Thank you. The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you interviews with the candidates in the special election for state representative. 1623 Studios is hosting us, and Steve Hagan will cover this for the Gloucester Daily Times. The League is a nonpartisan organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in their government. We do not endorse any individual candidate for public office. The special election for state representative is Tuesday, March 31st, and the primary is March 3rd. I'm June Michaels, a Rockport resident. The candidate with me is Christina Delizio, Republican. Raised in Massachusetts, she has a degree in political science and history from UMass Lowell and earned her law degree from New England Law while raising 3 children. She began her career in environmental consulting indoor air quality, lead-based paint, asbestos, etc., and practiced law in Maryland for several years, involving liability, property damage, and litigation. Ms. Delizio moved to Manchester with her husband and 3 children in 2014. She served on Manchester's planning board from 2017 to 2024, and as a planning board member served on other town committees such as Open Space and Recreation, Bike and Ped, and Housing Planning. Is there anything you would like to add of a personal note to the introduction?
I would like to thank you for having me here today. I would like to thank 1623, and I would like to acknowledge the land that we are on for what it was before we recognized it today for what it is as Cape Ann.
What is the most important reason that you decided to run for state representative?
The most important reason, I'd actually thought about running 2 years ago, and at that time there wasn't an open seat. So the most important thing was I think there's just an opportunity, and I concluded my time on the planning board, and that experience with some things that were going on at a state level, the MBTA zoning, some climate resiliency, the climate mandates. I just felt like Cape Ann needed a larger voice on Capitol Hill. So that's the major reason. I don't feel like we are being heard.
You are running as a Republican. Please explain how your policies and goals are represented by your party.
By my party.
Why that party? What makes you be a Republican?
Okay.
As opposed to unenrolled.
Okay.
We have 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat, and 2 unenrolled people
Okay,
at the moment.
I understand. I'm sorry.
So that's why we're asking the question about party affiliation.
I feel that fiscal responsibility, and I feel like that is a number one party trait that I am going to. Less government, more money back to the people. Communities and residents know best what they should do with their money. And the policy that I am striving home, and I'm actually meeting with the state auditor tomorrow night. She's actually coming to speak at an event I will be at, is the audit. And I think everyone can come together on that. It doesn't have to be Democrat or Republican. It's just a financial and transparency issue. The audit, 72% of us voted for it. It needs to be done. So Diana DiZoglio is going to join me tomorrow and hopefully explain to some residents of Rockport, you know, how and why this isn't going forward and what we can do. And I hope to support her in the near future in doing that.
What do you believe is the most important issue for the voters in Essex 5th District?
The most important issue in the Essex 5th District, one issue, huh? One.
Oh, you can mention 2.
Okay. I do believe transparency, the audit is important for Cape Ann. And I believe the 3 issues that are important to me and why I'm running is accountability, affordability, and local control. I don't know where our conversation will take us, but I was very concerned about MBTA zoning. And I've really felt that that was a slippery slope that the state was coming into, especially Cape Ann. We're small coastal communities. Our infrastructure's failing to put this amount of housing that's, you know, I guess it's just has to be zoning, but the expectation is that amount of housing would be built. That was the purpose. So to do that without consideration of the aging infrastructure, I just don't think is responsible. So putting local control and our voices back into it, and making sure that these mandates that are put out there are actually funded, and exploring and potentially finding out or proposing some kind of legislation that would make sure that anything that is proposed and passed does have a financial impact more down to the nitty-gritty in our local communities. I feel that we are individuals, the electric bills, the are just fees after fees, and we don't know where they're coming from. So where that transparency is and it ends up in our wallets, that is what I'm most concerned about.
I have a question here on the MBTA
Oh.
Communities Act, and you've answered the first part of it, which
Okay.
is whether you support or oppose it. Since you oppose it, the second part of the question is, what housing initiative would you support?
So what I am, the law of MBTA zoning, I don't think is the issue. It was the regulations. And that put, in my opinion, a one-size-fits-all onto communities. I know there's conversation out there that the communities got to decide where it went and what they did, but the number and the density didn't change. So what would I do? I have a concern about the type of housing, for instance, as the MBTA zoning promotes. It's apartments. And I don't think we need more apartments. We need more smaller scale homes, things that people can buy, condos, townhouses, that first-time homeowners, workforce housing, and seniors can downsize into to open up those larger homes for growing families. We don't need 15 units per acre. We need single family, smaller starter units. They don't have to be single family. I take that back. It could be condos, but they need to have some ownership in them. I feel that developers are making a large profit while our young people and our seniors don't have the ability to invest in something that they can build with. So,
what committees would you ask to be put on, and what would be your priorities for the committees you're on?
I like housing. I think it's important, and I think I worked hard. I know I worked hard on the planning board to figure out where it was. And one example was, in Manchester, there is an opportunity, if you had a corner lot, that if you tore down that, you would have frontage on two side streets. And so that lot now became able to develop into two. So none of the communities on Cape Ann meet meet our 10% affordability. And so we're just adding to the problem. So my idea was, if you took one down and you built two, you'd have to at least make one of those affordable. And it didn't gain traction, but no, I'd like to explore. We need to help developers out sometimes, give them some land, give them some incentives, but we need to work on affordability. It's just not about building mass housing. We need some affordability in there.
Is there another committee you would like to be on?
I am very interested in at the current moment, the electricity, power, national grid, gas, where this is going. I don't feel that the people understand what is being proposed for 2030. That mandate has already been, extended in the last few days. The people don't understand why this amount of money is coming back to hit their wallets. So I would like to be in that conversation.
If you could get only one bill through this term in the legislature, what would that bill be?
Propose my own or something?
Oh, one that's already, since this is a special election, we're already partly into the term.
One bill that I saw, and I believe it would help not Manchester, Cape Ann, specifically Gloucester, Rockport, is a bill that was out there regarding private roads. It was Representative Ferrante and Senator Tarr, and it was taking a look at how, if it met certain criteria, private roads, public funds could be used on private roads.
What budget priorities should the state legislature have for dealing with the cuts and uncertainty of federal funding?
Priorities? I think that our priorities should be to take care of Massachusetts residents. And we all need to. We do it on a individual basis. We look at our wants versus our needs. And sometimes we have to make hard decisions. What are our wants and what are our needs? And I think the legislature needs to do the same. And I'm not sure that they're doing it at this point. So as a freshman representative, it won't be put on a budget or Ways and Means. That's something that's earned, but that interests me. And I think that people that have been in those positions for a while need to maybe take a look back and reassess priorities.
All right. ICE.
ICE.
What would be the role of the legislature what should the legislature do if we had thousands of ICE agents moving into Massachusetts to arrest immigrants?
So the role of the legislature, ICE is a federal organization, right? So the legislature has to stay in its lane. So ICE is there carrying out federal law. There are separation of powers, and that is, we heard this conversation. I think it's a bit rhetorical. So what can the state legislature do? The state legislature needs to vote and act and see if they wanted to decide if they want to act, right? So it's not really the state legislature's place to intervene with that.
What specific state education programs would you support to improve the Essex District K through 12 education?
K through 12 education, what I have found in the Manchester, Essex, and the Gloucester and Rockport school districts is that there is a increasing need for VOTEC education. And also there has been some legislation to increase the amount of apprenticeships here on Cape Ann. And I think that different opportunities for high schoolers is very important. So somehow expanding the VOTEC, if it's not in building a new facility, somehow incorporating that into our high school curriculum would be important.
All 4 Cape Ann communities are coastal communities. What would you do to prepare the district for the impact of climate change and sea level rise, the impact on seawalls and waterfront infrastructure and beaches, and do you support a staged retreat from the waterfront?
That's a good question. And it's interesting. I think my opinion is one, but it's different when you're asking the property owners too, right? So if a stage retreat, if you're a property owner there, that was an issue in Manchester. There was some proposal, should we abandon Ocean Street? And it wasn't really communicated with Ocean Street. So it's important to involve the community. And all of our communities, all 4, are involved with climate resiliency. We're studying them. We're taking advantage of the grants and as much as we can. It's going to come down to money. How much money is the state and the federal government going to give us to reinforce what we have and build some seawalls if it's possible? But retreating, most of it's privately owned. We can't, make decisions unless we're going to, retreating in the sense of abandoning, such as a road that's subject to flooding. Is that what you're? FEMA's rules, if a building is damaged in a storm more than 50%, maybe it should be torn down and not rebuilt. Oh, absolutely. But I think that's a private FEMA and insurance policy issue. That's not something that, my opinion on that isn't really it's going to be affected by insurance and FEMA and the individual. So I do agree with my previous statement that, most of these properties are privately held. And if it's a community, Manchester, Essex, Gloucester, Rockport community, yes, I think we absolutely need to reconsider whether and where we are building our public buildings.
What specific state initiatives would you support or propose to bolster the local fishing industry and a blue economy?
What would I propose to bolster the fishing industry? Well, I have been speaking and taught with the fishermen, and what I have come back to, and it came down to the unfunded mandate. It's the individual fishermen and their need to monitor themselves and have, the state representation on these charters when they're out and reporting. I really do feel like this is another unfunded mandate. So trying to figure out how to get this fisherman some relief on these reporting people that need to come on board with them. It's an initiative that if they're required to have their presence, then they shouldn't feel the consequence of it.
Mm-hmm. So now it's time for your 1-minute final address to the voters.
Oh, okay. Thank you for having me. I am Christina Delisio, and I would be honored to be your next state representative. And I feel that my experience with the community and my several terms as a planning board member and my legal education would make me a supreme, that's a bad word, sorry, candidate as for this position. And I believe this position is involving reading and writing and drafting legislation, and that's what my education has trained me to do. And I believe all my different experiences, ranging from environmental to I taught civics, and that civic engagement brought me to the need or the want to continue to serve our community.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Christina Delisio, Republican primary candidate, for agreeing to be interviewed, and thank 1623 Studios and the Gloucester Daily Times for bringing this to the public. Please remember to vote in the primary on March 3rd and the special election on March 31st. The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you interviews with the candidates in the special election for state representative. 1623 Studios is hosting us, and with us is Steve Hagan, the reporter with the Gloucester Daily Times. The League is a nonpartisan organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We do not endorse any individual candidate for office. The special election for state representative is Tuesday, March 31st, and the primary is March 3rd. I'm June Michaels, a Rockport resident. The candidate with me is Ashley Sullivan, former chairwoman of the Gloucester Republican City Committee. She grew up in Missouri and came to Cape Ann with her husband, where they started the ShoreTech business, a small business on Harbor Loop that focuses on marine electronics, navigation, and security systems for the recreational and commercial fishing vessels. Having done work on a majority of the boats in Gloucester and Rockport, Ashley and her husband have spent a lot of time working alongside the fishermen. She's a member of the Cape Ann Business Alliance, the New England Marine Electronics, and the Protect Our Coast, Massachusetts, and has been chair of the New England Conservative Coalition of the North Shore region. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the personal biography?
No, that was perfect. You summed it up perfectly.
What is the most important reason that you decided to run for state representative?
Okay, so for me, it's a very personal thing. When my husband was laid off, we lost everything. We put our stuff in storage. We lost that too. And here I was with 2 kids, nowhere to go. And after years of paying into the system, and when we went and we needed help it wasn't there. Housing wait list was shut down, because it's 8 years out. It was, we did get help with food stamps, but that aside, that assistance wasn't there. And, you wonder, had I been able to save just a fraction of that, would I be, in the situation I'm in? So for me, I want to be able to help people. I don't ever want anyone in the situation that me and my family were in. I never want them to, go without. The food pantry helped us immensely during that time. If it weren't for them, while we waited for the food stamps to come in, I don't know what we would have done. There were initiatives that helped with Christmas. There was this, there was that. The community, the local community is really what helped. But when it came to that state and federal level assistance, it just wasn't there. So for me, I want to help people. I don't ever want anyone to have to go through what we went through to get where we are.
You're running as a Republican. Please explain how your policies and goals are represented by your party.
So my right now for me, the main thing that my campaign is running on is affordability, accountability, and also the environment and our coastline and small business. It's really a focus for us, the economic aspect. The Republicans, they believe in minimal government. They believe in, less taxation. Now, for me, I think that, our tax dollars should be spent very wisely, and taxes should be raised as a last resort, not the initial and one and only solution. I think that there are creative ways that we can come up with revenue that, because the more of the burden that we put on the people in that regard, the more expensive things become, and the harder it is for people to make ends meet. And so for me, that's really what it comes down to, is just the live and let live approach.
What do you believe are the most important issues for the voters in Essex 5th District?
We've got a lot going on. I think that funding is always an issue. I think that housing right now is a serious issue between that and the economy. I think people, we've got now you see legislation being proposed that would control how many miles you can drive and, tax you on that would add, now municipalities are wanting to pass legislation so they can raise the sales tax. Salem wants to almost double the sales tax. And if that were to happen, it would absolutely kill small business. So my goal is to protect the taxpayer, protect the residents, make sure we have funding, but we find it in different ways as opposed to putting all of that burden on our constituency. I'm also very much focused on the fishermen and the fishing industry, doing what we do and where we live for every single fisherman. There's 7 other jobs that are created, like marine electronics, mechanics, so on and so forth. It's a very important local industry, and they're struggling right now, and they need help. And a lot of that also has to do with what's going on off our coast. We've got, environmental solutions that all have driving up energy costs and taking us down a path of destruction. And I think that there are much environmentally friendly ways for us to go as far as energy, and that will also save us billions and billions of dollars. And people shouldn't have to, they voted to raise the price cap on the electricity in 2022, the legislature, and ever since then, we've been funding these projects through our electricity. And that's why people are seeing their rates go up. And so for me, when our most vulnerable can't heat their homes, that's an issue. So I really would like to, the energy issues, the environmental issues, the funding, the taxation, just across the board, there are problems in our district that need to be addressed. And in order for us to do that, I really want to work with and hear from the people, which is why constituency services is a priority.
If you could get only one bill through the legislature in the upcoming term, what would it be?
So once again, I think funding is an issue right now. There is actually, and I've been actively, if you go on my webpage, I have legislation posted. I've actually been working with State Representative John Gasky out of Plymouth and his aides and staff. And he's in the 2nd Plymouth, excuse me. And he's got a bill right now that would help with the funding issue and could be earmarked for certain things. And it's Bill HD 4388. And basically what that is right now there is kids, 18 to 21-year-olds can go buy scratch tickets from the state. They can go to the gas station and buy scratch tickets from the state. They can go to New Hampshire and gamble. They can go to Rhode Island and Connecticut and gamble. But when it comes to going to a casino in the state of Massachusetts, they're unable. They can sign their life away, to the government and join the army, enlist, but they can't go to a casino. So we're losing millions in revenue to other states, and I think that that's something that would bring in a lot of revenue, and I know we're losing this revenue. My son is that age. I've been with him over to New Hampshire, and they see a rush of kids every weekend. Every weekend you go and it's filled. So I think that's something that we need to consider, and we need to kind of take some of that revenue back from the surrounding states.
What committees would you ask to be placed on, and what would be your priority for the committees?
Okay, so there are a lot of committees. Like I don't even know of all of the committees. There are a lot of committees, but my main, so Ways and Means, I think, and Margaret said on Ways and Means. I actually believe that's very important because I think that that's where a lot of our funding issues are. They're the ones that fund things. So I think that in order for us to be able to either save money going forward or, earmark for our community, I think it's important you have someone in there. So with her being gone now, we've lost that, and that's something that I would prioritize.
What budget priorities should the state legislature have for dealing with the cuts and the uncertainty in federal funding?
So I believe that first and foremost, our local, the local things, what's the local stuff. I think that the schools are important. I think that our most vulnerable populations are important. I think our veterans are important. I think that our, taxpayers that have paid into the system, like I said, for years on end, are most important. So they are the ones, to me, that should come first and foremost. I believe that there are certain, there are things that we pay for that we shouldn't, and there are ways that taxpayer money is abused, and then there are things that we should be funding and we should be paying for. Things like the schools, the roads, the bridges. We had the septic system when I ran the last time. That was a huge point of contention. So I think that should be the state's priority, and only then do we go from there. That's really where I'm at.
What specific state education initiatives would you support to improve the district's K-12 education?
So there are, I actually was a part of, I signed and helped collect signatures actually when I was running for office the last go round. They were collecting signatures to try and get, in the MCAS that on the ballot. And so that was something that I backed that. So I also and I had spoken to the teachers union, and there was something that they had asked for as far as they had asked about funding, whenever their contracts are negotiated, that we take into account the economy and how much more expensive inflation, and when we negotiate these contracts so that they get fair wages. And I actually believe that's very fair. The way the economy has been and then how prices have doubled, I can't blame them. They want a fair wage. How can they afford to live? And they're taking care of our children. So I feel that that's something that I would absolutely support as well. I'm very open-minded as far as education goes. I will never outright say no. It's something that if you come to me, even if I do disagree with you, I'm always happy and willing to find a middle ground. I think parental rights are important. I think teacher rights are important. I think that it's not black or white, a lot of these situations. I think that the answer's kind of in the middle there. And so that's the direction I'm headed, and that's the kind of policy that I would support. But I do think that it's important that we take care of our teachers in our schools. And there was something else that I found really important considering local issues as far as the schools go. There was something about maintenance, making sure that maintenance plans were included. There was another piece of legislation they had mentioned in the questionnaire. I had filled out an endorsement questionnaire recently. And in that legislation, they want moving forward when we build these schools for there to be appropriate maintenance plans in place. And after what we've seen East Gloucester and up by Marshall's Gloucester Crossing there, I think that it's very, very important that we have plans in place for these. It saves us millions and millions of dollars in the long run. And it's important to take care of these schools after we build them, and the funding needs to be there to do so.
Do you think the Massachusetts legislature should be audited?
Absolutely, 100%. I think that's the first thing we should be doing. 72% of Massachusetts voted for it. It should be prioritized. It shouldn't be fought. Everyone should take their ego out of it, take their politics out of it, take a step back and say, this is what the people want. This is what's best for them. This is our, people forget. The taxpayer works hard for that money. They scrape tooth and nail. I did so for years. Cleaning, working the corner store, lobstering, anything and everything I could to make a dollar because I could not pay my bills and feed my kids. So when the government takes that money and spends it so frivolously, it's like these people kill themselves to make that money, to earn that money. And it's treated as if, whatever. So I think it's extremely important. I 100%, I think, I support it, and I think it's the first thing that should be done. And then once we figure out where the issues are, think of the funding that could possibly be opened up just by changing our practices. So yes, I do.
So, housing. Do you agree with the MBTA communities law passed in 2021, which mandates more dense residential zoning near public transportation? And if not, what alternative would you support?
So, this is a very difficult issue, a very difficult and complicated issue, because it's so multifaceted. I think zoning is a local issue. I think that it's up to the individual communities. They should be able to decide their zoning. But with that in mind, I also think as a property owner, you should have certain rights. It's your property. You should be able to build and develop on it if you want to do so, as long as you're not infringing upon the rights of others and their properties. So I think that there are aspects to it that open the door, but I don't like the fact that it is forced. Or funding is going to be withheld if you don't comply. I don't like the fact that, there's not more protections in place as far as the developers coming in, and which I also don't foresee happening necessarily, but in certain areas, but I do in others. I think that it's just, I don't like it the way it sits. But the community voted for it, and Gloucester, and I believe in Manchester and Rockport as well. And so if that's what they want, then that's what we've got to support. But I think that moving forward, you've got to keep in mind that this is driving that up, and it's causing a lot of issues, and in addition. So we need protections in place, and so I don't like it the way it sits. But I do support. I myself have been a victim of the housing shortage in the area. I've got a big family. It's near impossible to find housing. We've gotten very, very lucky, but we could use a bigger home. And because of the housing situation, we haven't been able to do so. Housing prices have doubled in, 5 years, I believe they said. And so prices have gotten astronomical. But I think a lot of that has to do with the economy, taxes, regulations that are, in place that make it hard for homeowners to either build or add additions or purchase property and, develop into. So I think that's part of the problem. I think it's a very all-encompassing issue and like the perfect storm of, as far as housing goes. So I don't think that forcing things on communities is the answer. I think zoning should be decided locally, but once again, there should be protections in place. So the way it sits, I'm not a huge fan, but if the people voted for it, they voted for it.
Thank you. What should the legislature specifically do if thousands of ICE agents are sent to Boston and the North Shore to arrest immigrants?
So I think the biggest issue right now, I understand everyone's concern. I believe in legal immigration. I don't necessarily believe in how they have been, handling things across the board. I think there are things they're doing right. I think that there are things that they're doing way wrong. I think that because we hired such a large amount of people in such a short period, that kind of it has played a role. I think that, we definitely on the government side need to work on de-escalation. I think that should be focused on and prioritized. But I also think that it's important as a community and as the people, they're here to keep us safe. They are here, that's supposed to be their goal. And so if people would just comply and have their day in court instead of trying to fight cops on the streets, these things wouldn't be happening in the first place. Our system is set up the way it is for a reason. And so when people interfere and do what they do and cause problems, it's not good. I support law enforcement. I support ICE. I support our system. But I do not necessarily think that they're handling things correctly across the board. I think there are things that we need to take a step back and evaluate and fix. But there's a reason they're here. We've got a problem. And how else do you fix it? The alternative to me is also unacceptable. The drugs pouring in, the gangs, the violence, the cartels, the terrorists, all that stuff. It's not necessarily, the day-to-day person, but it's the bad people that are able to sneak in because of the way people are coming in. I think our immigration process needs to be fixed so this doesn't continue to be an issue. I think both parties need to stop using it and step to the plate and fix the immigration process. And then we wouldn't have any of this. None of this would be occurring. So that's how I feel about it. I think that, they need to handle things differently. I think people need to comply and have their day in court. I do not condone violence, and I do not condone violence against officers. But I also think that people have certain rights, and those rights should be protected at all cost. So that's what court is for.
So, back to the waterfront for my last question.
Okay.
All 4 Cape Ann communities are coastal communities. What would you do to prepare the district for the impact of climate change and rising sea levels on seawalls, waterfront property, and beaches? Do you support developing a staged retreat from the waterfront?
So I do think it's really important that this is something that, so the climate's been changing for the climate is changing. It's been changing since the inception. And there's, really at this point, aside from being as environmentally friendly as we can, there's nothing we can do. I think that developing on the waterfront when the sea level's rising is probably not a good idea. That we are wasting and spending a lot of money that potentially could just be destroyed. So I do think that this staged retreat that you mentioned, I think that is something that, going forward as we plan our communities and how we want to approach things, I think that, yes, we need to keep that in mind. And I don't know what that retreat would look like, but I don't think that it makes sense to develop where we're going to have issues. And we know we're going to have issues. There are areas in town we know every time there's a storm, it's going to either flood or we all know where to go. Watch the waves, right? Like, it's just what it is. So I think developing in those areas is a bad idea. And yeah, we should pull back a little bit. Now, as far as fund, I think there needs to be bills in place to help fund communities like ours when we have these issues, when these storms hit, when we have these problems. I'm also going to tell you, I am a full supporter of I'm all for green energy. We even on the boats we use solar panels, we use all different types of power sources. It's something that I am not necessarily against. But I think that right now we're heading in a direction, the state, and you talk about, what we can do environmentally and as far as communities and the whole green thing. I think that it's very important because of where we live, because we're on the ocean. But I think the direction we're headed right now doesn't really make any difference in that. Offshore wind, for example. BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, as well as the company that built those offshore wind, they did a study to see how it would help greenhouse gas emissions. Mm-hmm. They found there would be zero measurable difference in greenhouse gas emissions by building offshore wind. On the other hand, they just recently did a study to see if we went, there's nuclear and solar, a totally different direction. And they found that we would not only save $400 to $700 billion, but we would also save 50% in greenhouse gas emissions. 50%. That to me is a huge, huge difference and is much more environmentally friendly than the direction we're going. So those are the things that we really, before we jump in and we have to, this green policy, we have to take a step back and say, okay, how does it hurt our environment to get there? Because those things, they're digging up the ocean floor. There's hundreds of them. They're dug 100 feet deep down in the ocean floor. The cables that run into them to the substation back to shore. There's nothing green about that. The boats going back and forth, trucking them back and forth. It's a mess. And further, it's not good for the sea life, the construction of these things. So I think that heading that direction, we're just going to be tearing up our coastline, and we can do something that's much more green. And I think that's really what we need to be doing. If we can make a difference that way in greenhouse gas emissions, we should be making a difference that way in greenhouse gas emissions. I think littering is a huge issue as well. I've got problems with that. As a community, we should be stepping to the plate with that. There's a million different things as far as the environment goes with me. I love the ocean and our coastline. It's home for me.
Thank you.
And so I do whatever I can to protect that. And I think it's important we all do that.
All right. I'm going to it's time for your 1 minute to say anything you want to the voters out there.
Okay. So I've been attacked for being blue collar. I've been attacked for being working class. I have been attacked for basically being just like you, the person I'm trying to represent. I have built my business and started from ground zero, absolutely homeless, clawed my way up, and now we are one of the biggest marine electrician companies on New England. And I cannot begin to tell you, every step of the way, the government held me back. I don't want that for my constituency. I want to help people thrive. I don't want you to just survive. I want you to thrive. I want to help make things more affordable. I want to lower your electricity rates. I want to keep our coastline clean and environmentally friendly. I want to help our fishermen. I want to help our schools and our teachers. And most importantly, I want to help the blue-collar, working-class voter have a better life. We deserve it. Cape Ann deserves it. And I hope that you vote for me on the March 3rd primary.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Ashley Sullivan, Republican primary candidate, for agreeing to be interviewed, and thank 1623 Studios and the Gloucester Daily Times for making this acceptable to the public. Please remember to vote in the primary March 3rd and in the special election on March 31st. The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you interviews with the candidates for the special election for state representative. 1623 Studios is hosting us, and Steve Hagan will report in the Gloucester Daily Times about the interviews. The League is a nonpartisan organization which encourages the active participation of citizens in their government. We do not endorse any individual candidate for public office. The special election for state representative is Tuesday, March 31st, and there is a primary for 5 candidates on March 3rd. I'm June Michaels, a Rockport resident. The candidate with me is Sarah Wilkinson. She is a mom, raising her family on Cape Ann, and a local business owner. She served for 18 years on the Rockport Board of Selectmen, including 5 one-year terms as chairwoman, and served on the town's Capital Improvement Planning Committee, the Pandemic Reopening Committee, and as liaison to the School Committee and Finance Committees. She has a Bachelor of Science from UMass Amherst and an MBA from Suffolk University. She owns and operates a property management and bookkeeping business. Sarah is currently on the board of the CCB Foundation, which operates the core Peer Recovery and Resource Center on the State Fish Pier in Gloucester. She's also vice president of the Friends of Rockport Athletics. Is there anything you'd like to add to the personal biography?
Nope, that sounds perfect. Thank you.
All right. What was your most important reason for wanting to run for state representative?
Thank you, June, for having me, for interviewing, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and to Cape Ann TV for hosting us. I think the most important reason I'm running is because public and civic service is in my blood. I feel like I was kind of born with the people have a bug and an itch in them to do certain things. From a young age, I was brought up with the notion that living on Cape Ann is a privilege and one that we should never take for granted. And I feel like I've woken up every day, growing up here and now raising my own family here, knowing that and believing that it's my kind of responsibility to give back. And this is the way that I've decided to do that. I got an unbelievable amount of personal satisfaction and, and also just enjoyment from my close to 20 years of public service in Rockport. And this has been something I've actually been thinking about doing kind of since retiring from the Board of Selectmen, that if a state seat opened up, that I would throw my hat in the ring, and no time like the present.
Okay. You're running a write-in campaign for the Democratic primary. Please explain how your values and goals are represented by your party.
It's interesting. The write-in is a little bit complicated. I have always been an independent, even though and I believe that that's basically the kind of easiest way to explain it, is because being independent, I was able to focus on my community and not party politics, which has been very, very important to me, especially being a local official. But now kind of running for a state seat, being in the state legislature, you would have to caucus with a party, and I would definitely caucus with the Democrats. I feel as though kind of, growing up, I feel like maybe I'm a moderate Democrat, maybe a little bit more fiscally conservative, but definitely more socially liberal, I would say.
What do you believe is the most important issue or issues for the voters of Essex 5th District?
I think I wish there were only one, but I think that there are several. The past month since I decided to run, I have spent every day that I'm not, every minute basically that I'm not working or taking care of my kids, meeting with residents from all 4 communities and kind of listening to what they have to say and what they think are the main issues that are facing the district. I would say the top issues are affordability and housing, strengthening our schools and our industry, industry including fishing, hospitality, tourism. But those are kind of the main issues that people have reached out to me with, and that basically matches, what kind of being an elected official in Rockport. I believe that although our communities are different, we do kind of share similarities overall with the issues.
What committees would you ask to be put on, and what priorities would you have for those committees?
Oh, goodness. I haven't even started to think about that yet. My focus, and this is an absolute whirlwind. I mean, in a perfect world, we would have several months to prepare, but I'm honestly right now focused on getting elected, but that's something that I'll have to add to my list. I actually had an interview last week with the Mass Teachers Association, and we started talking about the ballot questions. So I've just started to research the ballot questions, and I'm going to start researching the committees as well. But right now I'm focused on meeting as many residents that I don't know across Cape Ann, and really seeing what their issues that they want represented on Beacon Hill are.
If you could get just one bill through this term in the legislature, what would it be?
Oh, goodness. I'll have to give that some thought and come back to it.
So it could be either one you would propose and file, or one that's already been in the works for a while.
I think let me give that some thought, but I think it would be education related, funding on education. I think that, I feel like we're getting closer to education with funding Chapter 70, circuit breaker funding, but I also feel that as I, travel around to our 4 communities, there still is kind of this inherent push-pull between funding education and other funding, and I think that until we tackle that statewide, that it's going to be a constant tug of war.
Do you think the millionaire's tax is working and the use of it for education is being as effective as it could be?
I'm not sure that it's working yet. It's interesting. I've been talking to people who are kind of on both sides of it, but I think it's kind of yet to see if it's actually panning out to work.
Are there any specific education programs that you would support or enlarge?
Any specific education programs? No. Obviously, I think special education funding is very important, in the transportation. For 20 years, we had Senator Tarr, Representative Ferrante come to Rockport and tell us how hard they were working to fund, and we saw just how much special education transportation is. So I think that's one of the prime drivers that is absolutely crushing our communities.
Do you agree or disagree that the legislature ought to be audited?
I actually agree with that, and I think that that's probably something that might make me more moderate than other Democrats. But I truly believe that if 72% of Massachusetts residents vote for something like an audit, that both parties should come together for the state, with the best interest of the state in mind, and they should find a way to make it happen. I actually was just watching an interview earlier today of our auditor, and I was actually just told that she's coming to Cape Ann tomorrow night. And I really hope that this is something that everyone can put politics aside and say, hey, 72% of the voters decided that they want an audit. Like, let's make it happen. It seems to me to be, honestly, a silly kind of political play.
What should be the budget priorities of the legislature in dealing with the cuts and the uncertainty of federal funding?
It's interesting. I think obviously it's great that the governor just a few weeks ago announced funding the gap in healthcare. Mm-hmm. But I also feel that it's important that we find ways to fill in the gaps for federal funding, but also make sure that we're not doing it at the expense of other items, obviously. Because if that's the case, so for example, if there are 5 large areas where there are gaps because of federal funding cuts, and we're able to kind of like snap our fingers and fill them with state funds, it means that either something was, there was excess in the state, which I think needs to be looked at, or it means that we need to like reprioritize. So I need to do a deeper dive into where, Governor Healy is proposing getting the money to fill the healthcare gap. While I'm grateful that she's able to do that, and obviously I don't want any Massachusetts residents going without healthcare, I do think that it's not a long-term answer that every time the federal government makes cuts, the states can just fill it in or find ways to fill it in.
Do you agree with the MBTA communities law, which passed in 2021, which mandates denser zoning around near to public transportation?
I supported the MBTA 3A zoning in Rockport, and it passed. I wish, though, that bigger picture, that our state officials had come to us and said, we have this problem, a housing problem, which we all know we all have the same issue. Here is our idea for how to fix it. I wish that they had put funds into a consultant for each community and sent the consultant to each individual community to come up with a goal or kind of package, so that because it was not a one-size-fits-all answer. What is proper for Gloucester is not proper for Manchester or Rockport. What's proper for Chelsea is not what's proper for Manchester or Rockport. But overall, we do need more housing. We need more affordable housing. I know that the 3A does not provide affordable housing. I think some people were under the impression that it did. It does not, but it does increase housing, obviously. So overall, the idea of it, I'm in favor of. I supported it, but looking back, I do truly, truly believe that if the state had taken a different tact in terms of working with the communities, instead of, people say it was jammed down our throats. I wouldn't go that far, because it is, they did have a goal, but just as a local elected official, I would have appreciated and frankly had ideas to work with our state officials on it.
What would the legislature do, what should the legislature do if ICE agents are sent in large numbers to Boston and Massachusetts to arrest immigrants?
I believe that hopefully, I was just reading some news on it this morning, that hopefully there is going to be a break with how ICE is coming into our communities with what's going on in Minneapolis. I would, if elected, love to be part of that conversation. I understand that immigration is a massive and complicated problem, but clearly what's going on now is not the solution. And I personally know people in our community that are absolutely terrified to leave their houses, to go to work, to send their kids to school, and that's just wrong. To me, it's wrong, and I would fight for that. But as an elected official, it's also our responsibility to follow the law. So, and I was reading yesterday that I have to look more into that. The Boston police have ignored, I guess there's a program where like ICE or DHS can like request people who are being detained, and Boston police have ignored those requests, I believe, over the past year. So I have to look more into that. But I would frankly get elected officials from both parties together, along with our state leaders, our governor, and say, how can we work together, to avoid basically what's going on in Minneapolis now.
All 4 of the Cape Ann communities are coastal communities. What would you do to prepare the district for the impact of climate change and sea level rise and the impact on the infrastructure and of the waterfront? And do you support developing a staged retreat from the waterfront?
I wouldn't say at this point that I support any staged retreat from the waterfront, but I do support using science and working with consultants in Rockport. We worked with several consultants. Just a few years ago, we got a FEMA grant to reinforce the wall at Long Beach, and I think it was $1.3 million matching grant. And at the same time, we had studied kind of what's going on with the wall, because obviously sea level is rising and we need to be responsible. So I think at this point I would say I'm all for responsible development and creating, working on new construction. I do know from my work at Long Beach that other countries are doing work, kind of groundbreaking work in terms of building and developing, but in a more thoughtful and responsible way. For example, buildings that rise, walls that the water can go under. There are other countries doing things that I think if we were to think outside the box, we would still be able to, we wouldn't have to retreat just yet, but maybe more responsible.
And what specific state initiatives would you propose to bolster our local fishing industry and a blue economy?
I'm actually in the process now of meeting with lots of local fishermen. I have a few meetings set up, and I'm, looking to hear from them on what they need from state leaders. I was obviously very, very supportive of our fishermen. I have a lot of fishermen friends. My youngest son has a junior commercial lobsterman's license, and I will say I love lobstering with him and being his stern woman when he'll take me with him. But I met actually a few weeks ago with the head of the Northeast Seafood Coalition, and then I'm meeting with some Gloucester fishermen in a few weeks to really hear from them what they want from state officials, because I haven't been in that position before. And I truly believe that the way to work on the blue economy is to hear what, like directly from the horses or fish's mouths, as they say, what they want from us.
Well, that wraps up the questions that I have. And so it's time for your 1-minute address to the voters out there.
Great. I didn't prepare anything specifically, but I would just kind of reiterate from the beginning that I'm a local mom, I'm a local business owner, I'm a wife, and I'm a seasoned community leader. I feel like I'm well respected all over Cape Ann for my work in Rockport for close to 20 years. I love this entire community, probably at times too much. My family has said, my family jokes with me of like, oh my goodness, volunteering again. But I truly believe that it's in my blood, and to represent all of Cape Ann at the State House would be truly the honor of my life. I will work every day to represent all residents of Cape Ann. I think that there is a tremendous opportunity in our communities working together and connecting more. I think that working together, I like to say that as a whole, we're greater than the sum of our parts. And as I've traveled, to Essex, Manchester, Gloucester, and of course Rockport, I've learned that, that if we work together, I really, really believe that there's so much opportunity. I have very unique perspective of, for close to 20 years, working, wearing a local lens and working with our state officials. I know what worked, what didn't work, and what could be improved upon, and I think I would be an excellent candidate to do that. So I encourage anyone who's interested in reading more about me to go to my website, which is www.wilkinsonforcapeann.com. And on my website, you can also learn about writing me in.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Sarah Wilkinson, Democrat write-in candidate in the primary, for agreeing to be interviewed, and thank 1623 Studios and the Gloucester Daily Times for making these interviews accessible to the public. Please remember to vote in the primary on March 3rd and in the special election on March 31st. The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you interviews with the candidates in the special election for state representative. Studio 1623 is hosting us, and with me is Steve Hagan, the reporter with the Gloucester Daily Times. The League is a nonpartisan organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We do not endorse any individual candidate for public office. The special election for state representative is Tuesday, March 31st, and the primary is March 3rd. I'm June Michaels, a Rockport resident. The candidate with me is Gilbert Frieden, who is running as an unenrolled write-in candidate. He came to Essex in 2019 after 12 years in the banking industry with First Republic Bank, Citibank, and Deutsche Bank, providing personal investment services. He has a degree in business from Skidmore and became a certified financial manager in 2010. Mr. Frieden ran Senior Care's money management program and is also known on Cape Ann as a bar instructor, helping seniors with balance and mobility problems. He has served as vice president of the board of the Friends of the Essex Council on Aging and for 4 years on the Essex Senior Centers board. So, Gilbert, is there anything else you would like to tell them about your background?
Well, I've been in banking for 16 years. And certified financial planner is a designation, a specific designation from a group in Washington, D.C. So I just wanted to make sure that was changed.
Right. What was your most important reason for deciding to run for state representative?
June, I have been watching the news like everybody else, and I have been feeling like we've got to do something. And I obviously I lived in Hollywood for 18 years or in Los Angeles for 18 years. So people, there's always the when are you going to get famous thing. And I lived there for 18 years and never got famous, ended up looking to get famous. But I thought, wow, this whole election, it's this short little cycle. Maybe I should stand in front of a grocery store and see if I can get enough signatures to run and see if I can I'll be a regular citizen raising my hand and saying, if you want to put me in, I will try and help figure out how our community of Cape Ann can navigate through the larger United States, and then even bigger to the global catastrophe that is unfolding.
You're running as an unenrolled candidate. Which party would you choose to caucus with? And how are your policies and goals represented by that party?
Well, I would definitely caucus with the Democratic Party. I mean, I've been a Democrat in different times in my life, and I'm unenrolled now, and because so that I could actually just have more options. I felt like being unenrolled gave you more options in terms of when you voted, if you wanted to vote in a primary. So I think that the democratic values are really terrific. And I wish that the Democrats actually were implementing every value that they espoused.
Could you name a few specifically?
Well, like right now, I mean, Governor Healy isn't in favor of the rent control. And it's just, it's like, it's such a democratic value that of course we want to have rent control and we want to help people be able to afford to stay in their homes. So for the legislature to bring up rent control and for the governor to say that she won't support it, it's like, well, I'm going to support it. I'm going to support rent control. You know, the other, you know, the state auditor ran her sunshine campaign for transparency. And so that we could put sunshine onto the legislature's spending and everything. And it hasn't happened. Well,
I take it you're in favor of the audit then?
Sure. I mean, you know what? If I'm going to run and be the representative for the Essex District 5, and they put a ballot measure, we put a ballot measure on the in the election to say, hey, people, should we audit? And then 78% of Massachusetts voted, yeah, we should audit the legislature. Well, how can I run to be a representative and have 78% people behind me? I don't actually know the vote breakdown of the Cape Ann voters, but let's say it's over 50, I have to be for the audit. And when our Senator Tarr voted yes to bring it to after, when Senator Tarr voted yes to do the audit, and all the Democrats voted no, except for maybe one or two, I wouldn't be with them. I would be, I mean, I hate to say I'd align with the Republicans because I wouldn't want to look like Trump whatsoever, but I would align with what the people wanted. And what the people wanted was an audit. So vote for it, and then not only just vote for it, do it.
What do you think is the most important issue for the voters in Essex 5?
You know, when I was collecting signatures, different people told me different things, what was important. So everything's important to different people. But I have to say, being a certified financial planner, I've looked at a lot of personal budgets. Single people, married families, and entire home office budgets. And so I think the biggest problem is income inequality. And I did some research and, you know, we think that if someone's earning $100,000 a year, they are a baller. Like $100,000 a year, that's so much money. And then I was looking, okay, so if you live on Cape Ann and you and you're single, God forbid you have kids with $100,000. So you're single and you're trying to live on Cape Ann, honestly, and being a financial planner, I want people to save 10% of their income, or at least 5%, or how about not be in the red every month? But, you know, saving every month would be great. Actually, and it was a funny number that it came up with, $133,000 is what can make a person live comfortably, single on Cape Ann, paying for everything, not incurring debt, saving for the future, affording everything that an average person needs to afford. And I thought, isn't that funny? In order to live on 133, you got to earn $133,000 a year. So that's really, and I could go into that. I even brought some charts about, you know, sample family budgets that we can talk about more, and how, you know, and people listening to this are probably thinking, $100,000? I'm over here living on $40,000. I'm over here living on $60,000. Yeah, you are, and you're a freaking magician.
Okay. If you could get one bill through the legislature in the upcoming term, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, June. I could get so unpopular. But, I mean, what Oh, I want to raise the minimum wage. I understand that businesses say, well, great, now we're going to all go out of business, and every single business on Cape Ann is going to go out of business because we're going to raise the minimum wage. But you guys, I have friends that are earning the minimum wage. It doesn't work. They're going to have to. Do we want them to leave Massachusetts, or do we want? I don't know what the fallout's going to be. A few businesses to go out of business. We need to figure out how to have businesses that can stay afloat, make a good amount of money for their owner, and support employees so the employees can live, I don't know, within. It would be great if they lived on Cape Ann. It would be even better. I mean, but heck, if they can live 20 miles away from the business for that small of a commute, that's what I want. I want to put more people, and the thing is if the minimum wage went up, and these people, like my friends, could afford, I mean, it's not, if it goes up, it's going to go up 30 cents and then 70 cents and $1.80. I mean, this isn't going to make a big difference, but it's something. But my point was, once the minimum wage starts going up and people can afford something, just like Henry Ford paid his workers so that they could buy his car that they were making, it's going to help even the rich people. They'll be able to sell more things to the people that have a higher minimum wage.
So what committees would you ask to be placed on, and what would be your priority for the committees?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. What budget priorities should the state legislature have for dealing with the cuts and uncertainty of federal funding?
That's a great question. What is the question? What would the state legislature...
What should be the priorities in balancing the budget, knowing that a piece of the budget,
is going
the
to
federal
disappear.
funding,
Yeah.
might not be there?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. What could I mean, let me just tell you that I'm on the Cape Ann Transit Authority Board, and one of the priorities that I had been thinking about when I joined was I wanted to get free fares. And then and when I first joined the Transit Authority Board, I thought, can we sell free days? Like, what if a business wanted to advertise for Cape Ann Transit, and like maybe what could they give? Could they give $1,000 and then all the bus rides would be free that day? Or, I was thinking about a weekend. Could we? And then the billionaires tax came up, and the millionaires tax came up. And actually, the state legislature voted on it and kept voting it down. I would have voted yes, obviously, for it. So it finally passed in a ballot measure. And that's the money that's paying for Cape Ann Transit Authority to have free fare all year. All year last year, all year this year. It just, once a year, we see if it's in the budget and we can do it, and we can. And so the millionaire tax is paying for that. So increasing taxes.
The millionaire's tax, the funds that come in are dedicated to two different purposes. You've talked about transportation. The other is education. So what specific state education programs would you want to support or get rid of?
Well, my mother was a teacher, still is a teacher. She's actually right now volunteering at the Essex Senior Center, at the Essex Elementary School. She's probably already left by now because she leaves before lunch. But she teaches handwriting as a volunteer once a week at Essex Elementary. And it's not something that's in the curriculum anymore. And it's actually something that the kids love to do. It's not art class, but it's interesting learning how to write your name in a prettier way, cursive. So, you know, and years ago when my mom was working and I would go and visit her, because I lived in Los Angeles, but I would come home to visit mom, and I went to school with her and would just be a shadow for a day or something. And she was always had smaller reading classes. And one year I went kind of in September, October, and then I came back and visited in May or April. And these kids, almost all of the kids were older than the typical grade, the typical age for the grade that she was teaching. It was like third grade, but we had like fifth grade, sixth grade age kids in it. And we went around the room and everyone read a paragraph, and it flopped. It didn't work. These kids were not able to read the paragraph. We couldn't go around the room. Mom read some of the paragraphs so we could get through the page and the workbook and stuff. And then when I went back in April and and we went around the room and everyone read a paragraph, I couldn't believe what my mother had done in a year for these kids who had clearly stayed back 2 or 3 years. Everyone was reading. Everyone read their paragraph and we got through it. And I'm like crying. Mom, you taught these kids how to read this year. And she said, I know, I do it every year. And I was like, that's amazing. So absolutely special ed back, into as many classrooms as you can. And I understand that now more than ever, every child has an IEP, but I also know that parents say, my kid has an IEP, but I can't even get, attention or something about it, and so it's so tricky, but we should take that money and we're going to, I know that I went to I sat in on a school committee meeting in a different city, not up here on Cape Ann, just to encourage the school committee not to cut the budget for the social workers. And they ended up cutting some social workers, but hopefully because we were all there with all the signs that we all made and I made, hopefully they didn't cut as many as they wanted. And so hopefully some of that money from the millionaire's tax can get back into into social work and reading, because that's what I've noticed is pretty wonderful.
Okay, housing. Do you agree with the MBTA communities law from 2021, which mandates more dense residential zoning near public transportation? And if not, what housing alternative would you support?
What are we going to do about housing, June? I don't know. But I want, I live in Essex, and when we first learned about this new law or mandate about housing either with a commuter rail in your town or adjacent to a commuter rail, a town adjacent to a commuter rail stop, I was reading and I thought, are they really saying that Essex needs to have more than double the amount of units that it has now? Meaning, like, if Essex has about 1,000 housing units, it's got to add another 500. Those are not the actual numbers, but it's about. And I thought, well, that's so not going to work because we're coastal. We're on, Essex is on marshland. We can on the one hand, I would love to add housing to Essex. I'd love to have add housing to all the towns, because the more housing you have, the more property taxes you can earn for schools and for all your other kind of local municipal budgets. But we have to figure out if yes, we've got to build some houses because really we do need the property taxes, but we can't build as many as they want us to build. It's where? I don't want a clear-cut forest. I don't want to build on marshes. This is Cape Ann. We are gorgeous. We are a vacation destination. People come here to see beautiful environments, to go, you know, downriver, to go to on the Annisquam, and to go for walks in, you know, Dogtown, and we can't clear cut them so that we can have housing galore, so that we can satisfy these needs. Because honestly, too, and sea level rise is real. Global warming is real. We're going to have so many more problems if we get lots of thick, dense housing on a place that's going to be flooded in 40 years. What? That is not the kind of money management we're looking for.
All 4 Cape Ann communities are coastal communities. What should the legislature do to prepare the district for the impact of climate change and ocean and rising sea levels? And do you support a staged retreat from the waterfront?
Yes, staged retreat. I mean, how are we going to retreat? Like, 133 through Essex, or are we going to repave it? You know, how is this going to work? If you go to one of the Essex town meetings, you'll hear me and my lively speech. The legislature, Beacon Hill, came to Essex and said, we need to help you mitigate sea level rise. So in Essex, there's Apple Street. Apple Street is the only street that gets you from one side of Essex to the other side of Essex, other than 133. So in models, when sea level rise is really happening and high tides are happening, it might not be for 50 years, but we're certainly flooding coastal parking lots now more than 10 times a year. What Beacon Hill wanted to do is they wanted to give us 90% of the money, so that we could be kind of a guinea pig in this coastal management, like, how are we going to mitigate the risks experiment. And they wanted to, the one part of Apple Street needed to be raised up 6 feet. I stood there at town meeting and I said, we have to do this because Bambi and Thumper will benefit, because underneath the road, we're going to put a big pipe instead of the little tiny pipe that's there. So actually real animals can get through. So yeah, we don't even have to believe in climate change. We just have to believe that deer exist. And if you drive down 133, you know deer exist in Essex. And lots of other reasons. The town voted it down. And then the town management, select board, brought it back. And I stood back up there and I said, this is still a good idea. And the town still voted it down. So what I will do as as Essex 5 state rep is I'm going to advocate for the tough decisions. I'm going to be, we are so poised for me to do this. I know we've got time. So if I am your state rep, for Cape Ann, and I can stand up at the legislature and I can say, listen, everybody, we've got to do this. We've got to mitigate against climate change. We've got to help the poor people. I mean, the poverty level is bonkers. We have so many people living at $50,000 a year, and that's way above poverty, and they're not living high on the hog at $50,000. We've got to work on so many things. So I've got to support really complicated, tricky bills that are not going to be popular, because they're going to help poor people and they're going to help the climate, but they're going to be hard. And so I might, as your representative, make the speaker really upset with me because I'm not going along with him. And so he's not going to give me the appropriations that I want. But we are so poised for that to be okay, because we have amazing Senator Bruce Tarr. And when Cape Ann really needs something, we can go to Senator Tarr and say, we really need this. And this is happening over here. Gil's our great voice here, and you are going to be our great voice there. Cape Ann, there is no better time to elect Gilbert Frieden as state rep than right now. We are so ready for this. We've had the same person for 17 years. I'm going to listen to all of the communities But that's the other thing. When I was signing, people didn't
I
know
have one
everybody.
more question
Please
before
do.
we go to the end, and this is another tough one. What should be the role of the legislature? What should the legislature do if thousands of ICE agents are sent to Boston and the North Shore to arrest immigrants?
The legislature has to stop them. Period. That is not negotiable. ICE is not functioning within any of our societal values.
What
So
would a bill?
what could the legislature do? You know what we could do? In combination with the Attorney General, we could get together and say, and I think California is working on a bill like this that says there's no more federal immunity. And you know what that'll do? If there's no more federal immunity, then these ICE agents will go to their training, learn what they're supposed to learn, behave the way they're supposed to behave, and then an ICE agent can show up, be a professional, and execute their job. But if there's no immunity, they don't have to pass their training. Or if there is immunity, they don't have to pass their training. They don't have to do anything right. They can do whatever they want. So let's get rid of immunity, and then they can behave properly. And if they don't behave properly, they're going to jail in Massachusetts.
Okay. Now I'm going to give you 1 more minute to say anything you want to the voters out there before we close this down.
Where should we begin, June? When I heard about Aunt Margaret's passing at Thanksgiving, I was so sad because I know how, she came, I've only met her once. I raised the pride flag at the Essex Senior Center right before Pride weekend for Cape Ann. And she came to one of those events and I got to meet her and Drew Tarr. And it's unfortunate I never got to, we never got to know each other better. But when she passed away, I thought, well, she was a really good advocate for Cape Ann. Who's going to fill her shoes? Who's going to take the good that she brought to us and expand on it and grow? And I just thought, you know what? I'll raise my hand and I'll do it. And I will see if Cape Ann is ready for Gilbert Frieden. And that's what I want. I want you to go to votegil.org and I want you to sign up so that you can volunteer, call people, meet me, talk about me, and then talk about why Cape Ann will really benefit from having Gil Frieden as their Essex 5 district representative. And if you really want to find me and can't find me, votegil.org. But also, I play games at the Senior Center, which is a municipal building, so we can't talk about politics, but you can always come and play games. And I teach a lot of different exercise classes, and people can come to my exercise classes and get fit.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Gilbert Frieden, unenrolled write-in candidate in the primary, for agreeing to be interviewed, and thank Studio 1623 and the Gloucester Daily Times for making this accessible to the public. Please remember to vote on March 3rd in the primary and March 31st in the special election. Thank you.